We decided to develop a podcast that discusses the latest news and opinions in a number of sports that are popular in Australia as well as globally. We believed a sport podcast would be relevant to users due to the immense popularity of sport and the modernisation of sport coverage, which includes the rise of podcasting. An NBN study found that in 2017, Australians were spending approximately 60 million hours per week watching sport at home, whilst the number of Americans who listen to podcasts on a weekly basis has doubled since 2015, according to a study by Edison Research. These statistics show us that sport podcasting is both relevant and on the rise, making it a worthwhile endeavour. All our recording, editing and uploading culminated in the creation of the Back Row Sports Pod, available to all users on Apple Podcasts and or Spotify. In our first episode, we previewed Week 1 of the NRL Finals and discussed Week 1 of the NFL, the fourth test of the Ashes, the FIBA World Cup and the NBA off-season. The episode went for a total of 1 hour and 8 minutes, and despite the recording blunders that were encountered, all the audio that we recorded was accounted for after a few hours of combing through footage and was able to be used in our podcast. In our second episode, we followed a similar outline to that of our first episode. We discussed Week 2 of the NRL Finals, Week 2 of the NFL season, the fifth and final Ashes test, and the Boomers FIBA World Cup campaign, with the episode lasting just over an hour. We are planning to record at least one more episode, and then evaluate our situation from there. User feedback did not have a major influence over our decision. We instead focused on our own personal thoughts when discussing potential changes. Our focus, however, resolved around user satisfaction and creating the best podcasts possible for our audiences.
Before we recorded our first podcast, we identified the website buzzsprout.com as an appropriate platform to use. Buzzsprout is a site that allows users to create and share podcasts free of charge, which was perfect for me and Dylan in our digital Artefact. Along with this, we used the audio editing site Hindenburg to piece together different audio clips and include appropriate effects and modifications. We recorded our podcast using an iPhone XR whilst having an iPhone 7 as backup, in case any recording issues took place. This move proved pivotal as we encountered a number of recording mishaps during the development of our first podcast. Once completed, we discovered that certain clips had not been recorded and a number of segments had been cut off without our knowledge. After completion of our first podcast, we uploaded the finished product to Buzzsprout, which made the podcast available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We repeated this process for the second podcast and encountered significantly less issues, thanks to our experience. In an attempt to grow our reach and build an audience, we shared the podcast via Twitter. This, however, did not have the effect in which we had hoped, and our audience was still largely limited to our friends and family who had heard of the podcast through word of mouth.